our last episode, we had some epic downwind sailing, which brought us to one of the hottest places on Earth. This time around, we go out for a joyride on Sebastian's trimaran to the neighboring town of Mulahey, and then sail across the Sea of Cortez so we can make a border run to extend our Mexican visas. Bahia Concepcion is most likely one of the hottest places on Earth. And since we are anchored right at the mouth of that fiery inferno of a bay and needed any excuse to beat the heat, Sebastian's boat, well, it was the answer. So this motley crew of 4 sailors piled onto this speedy trimaran, and we were heading out for a little joyride.
Gonna pull us that way. You can tighten the sheet.
Just like that, we were off and we were sailing. And I gotta admit, I love sailing on someone else's boat, especially when that boat goes really fast.
On today's episode, we're sailing with Sebastian. Brendan's driving, nobody's getting the helm back. But we are doing about 8 knots, sometimes 8.5. So we're cooking. We're actually going on a veggie run. We're all out of fruits and veggies. So we're going up to the neighboring town of Mulahey just for veggies and just to go sailing on Sebastian's boat. So far, it's pretty fun. Flat, and we're screaming. Got about 12 to 15 knots of breeze right on the beam, which this boat loves. She loves it.
He likes to go fast.
After a pretty fast and fun sail, we got ourselves anchored just outside the town of Mulahey. But to get to the center of town, you'll need a dinghy for that, preferably one that's fast. Because from the anchorage to the center of town, it's a couple of miles upriver. And on the way, you'll pass through a minefield of blueberry jellyfish, the likes of which we've never seen anywhere else in the world. And just past those blueberry jellyfish and under the highway bridge is a perfect spot to land the dinghy, which gives you easy access to town. And after not too much wandering aimlessly, we found exactly what we were looking for. So, we loaded up our backpacks with fresh fruits and veggies and then we were out of there.
Came, we saw, we scored some veggies, and that's it. We got no wind. Now we're motoring. Slow going, especially since we raced our way here. That's all we got. Ken's driving.
At least we have fresh fruits and vegetables.
Amen.
There will be no starving.
Here, fishy, fishy. Fish, right there.
I could tell you that we went all the way to the neighboring town of Mulegé for fresh fruits and vegetables and spent an entire day doing it and just leave it at that. But really, those fresh supplies were just the smallest of reasons. Because sometimes a big adventure involves a joyride, some blueberry jellyfish, a backpack full of groceries, and a slow sunset motor home while trying to catch some fish. But after a few days of hanging around the mouth of Bahia Concepcion, which again is one of the hottest places on Earth, we finally had what we were waiting for. A good forecast to cross the Sea of Cortez. With a forecast of a consistent 12 knots right on the stern quarter, it was looking like we'd have some pretty great sailing. So, the next morning, we took that forecast and we were leaving this fiery inferno of a bay behind.
Well, we're just leaving Bahia Concepcion, and just like normal, the forecast is way off. We're actually heading across the Sea of Cortez to San Carlos, Guaymas area. We'll talk more about that later. But this was supposed to be a nice, easy downwind sail. We had the forecast of 10 to 12 knots from the south. Right now we got 25, 28 coming out of the east. So we're pretty well reefed down and pounding into it. We'll see how this plays out. There is a point a handful of miles to our south that I think once we get around that, this should change a bit. It should lighten up and shift around to the proper direction, but we'll see. At the moment, it's not at all what it's supposed to be.
But even though we were bouncing and pounding our way out of Bahia Concepcion and not sure if we should turn around and wait for better weather, Brenda, well, of course she was trying to catch us some fish.
Well, it's calmed down quite a bit. Still not exactly coming from the right direction, but we've got about 15 knots of breeze, which is a whole lot more comfortable than the 25 to 28 we were seeing. But I guess we should talk about plans. We got a busy week coming up. 3 big things happening. First of all, we're crossing the Sea of Cortez. Second, going up to the States. Our visas are running out in a few days, and we'd like to stay in Mexico a little longer, enjoy some of this season and incredible weather we've had. So we're running across the border to renew visas. But while we're there, we're going to check in with some family because we got a new baby in the family. That's pretty exciting. And we're going to smuggle a whole bunch of boat parts back across the border to keep this boat hopefully running and working through the rest of the season. So in the next week, we'll have 2 Sea of Cortez crossings, 2 border crossings. We're seeing a new baby. And we're smuggling boat parts. That's quite a week. But for the next 18 hours or so, crossing the sea. And we're hoping for a bit smoother sailing than we've got now. The forecast we left with was calling for 10 to 12 knots out of the south and consistent. It was looking like the best forecast we've seen in months for crossing the sea. Not what we're getting though, but that's the way it goes. We'll be there sometime tomorrow, hopefully after sunrise, and then we're heading to the border. And oh yeah, Ken and Sebastian, they're coming too. They've got no reason to go across, but it's always better to keep the group together. So we're drag racing. So far we're in the lead, but this is definitely Sebastian's kind of sailing. He's, well, I just talked to him on the radio. He's doing about 8.5 knots, so he's gonna blow by any minute. But that means he's gonna get across the sea sometime, well, sometime at dark. I don't think he cares. I think he just wants to pass us.
But surprisingly, Sebastian had a little restraint, and not even for bragging rights, didn't even blow by us. The three of our little floating homes would be just within sight distance all the way across the Sea of Cortez.
Well, the sun's about to go down, and we finally got the wind that was forecasted. We got about 12 knots right on the beam, which is pretty good sailing. We're doing about 5.5 knots, which will put us in San Carlos about 8 o'clock in the morning, which is about perfect. Can't beat it. But it's still a bit lumpy from the blow that was happening earlier, so hopefully this will smooth out in the next couple of hours. It's already starting to. So I think we'll be in for a pretty good night of sailing. See you in the morning.
And after a pretty easy night, just as the sun was coming up, San Carlos was coming into view. And right behind us, there was Ken and Sebastian. San Carlos is not only quite a picturesque little anchorage, there's also a marina tucked back into the corner of this bay, which would give us a nice and safe, easy spot to leave the boat while we made a quick border run.
Well, we made it. It was a successful crossing of the sea. Pretty, well, once we got going, it was pretty smooth and easy. Forecast filled in around, well, a little after dark. 10 to 12 knots on the beam, all the way across, pretty consistent, so pretty easy sailing. All three boats, kind of a tight formation all the way across, so it's kind of nice to see your friends and neighbors sailing across the sea. It's kind of cool, really. But we made it, so now it's logistics. We need to find ourselves a rental car that'll allow us to drive up and across the border so we can visit some family, smuggle in some boat parts, and come back and carry on across the sea again. So it's gonna be a busy week. But there's a huge fire on shore. That's kind of freaky. No one likes to see that. Hopefully everyone's all right. But now I think it's time for a celebratory breakfast. We're all starving. It's tough being a sailor out there. Going for some food.
After that celebratory breakfast, we pulled our boat into the marina, found ourselves a rental car that would allow us to drive up into the States, and then the next day, we were out of there.
most expensive cheap rental car we've ever paid for. Full tank of gas, air conditioner cranked up, and not so great tunes on the radio. But we're off. It's about 7.5 hours to my brother's house in Phoenix, Arizona, so it's going to be a long day. But these are some pretty nice roads. Still pretty smooth sailing. That's it. We're off. See you in the States. Hi, little guy. Oh, you're moving so much.
After a quick few days spent with family, we loaded up our little rental car with treats and snacks and boat parts, and we're headed back to our little floating home in Mexico. But that's about it for this episode. Thanks for watching. Join us next time as we sail our way back across the Sea of Cortez and head farther north into parts unknown.